Commissioner Mitz, what do you think of this tow policy now that it looks like some revamping is going to be done on it?
Well, those are not only my feelings, but the feelings of majority of the towing company operators in Montgomery County, the larger ones and most of the smaller ones, that it needed to be revamped. Also, DPS and some of the constables are in support of revamping it. Now, in fairness to the sheriff, it's only been 40 days now. We're into this, but we were all in agreement that whenever it started, that we knew that we were going to have to make adjustments to it, and that was my recommendation today, to make some adjustment to it, and it looks like we're going to be able to do that.
All right. Yeah. Commissioner's Court today. What do you think now as far as the changes possibly coming up? Do you think it's going to help out a little bit more?
We'll see. I mean, I think there were some wrecker owners there that were dissatisfied with it. I think it's there's a different demographic that it's going to hurt and help probably others, which has been the problem all along. It's hard to have an all-encompassing ordinance, and I recognize that. I have to give credit to Commissioner's Court. They've been working on this for over 8 years. And it's far from perfect, but something was passed this summer, and we've worked in the confines of that and tried to do our best to do the implementation, which is the sheriff's responsibility. We didn't write the ordinance; we were put in charge of implementation, and we've done our due best. The court has chosen to change that, and we will continue to do our best to make sure that the ordinance is followed.
The zone thing, they break it down to 4 zones now instead of, like Commissioner Metz said, having a vehicle towed from one side of the county to the other. And you think it's going to work and help out there?
It might. It remains to be seen. I think it creates new sets of problems. May solve some in the current ordinance, but then creates new problems otherwise. We'll see.
All right. Appreciate it.
Well, it's almost afternoon. Good afternoon, gentlemen, commissioners, judge. My name is Amy Milstead, and I am with Milstead Automotive. I represent the largest towing company here in Montgomery County. I would like to address the non-consent towing topic today. You're going to hear some discussion today about the new ordinance that's been put in place effective January 1st. This ordinance can and it will be a benefit to the county, but it still needs a little work. The purpose of this ordinance is for public safety in Montgomery County. This ordinance, when enforced properly, protects the law enforcement officers and the citizens that are on our roadways. It also protects our tow truck drivers, which we are very passionate about. There are some proposed changes in this ordinance, such as implementing 4 districts in the county, requiring a storage lot and tow trucks in that said district, and making sure the non-consent vehicle that is towed stays in the district it is towed from. The rotation dispatch put in place January 1st is not working. There are many flaws with this software, the rules, and the enforcement of this program. One example is common ownership. I will tell you, our company has seen a 60% decline in law enforcement tows since this program went into effect. Many, many more are suffering even worse than we are. The changes being discussed today will not make this program perfect, but it is a start to improve this process. I'm here today to let you know we support these changes that are going to be presented. If you vote in favor of these changes, you're protecting the citizens and the law enforcement here in our county. And you're also going to save and protect a few businesses out there in the towing industry that have been here for a very, very long time. At this time, I'd like to ask for the audience to stand if they're a towing company and they support what I'm saying today. I think that tells you you have a strong opinion here about what is being said. I can entertain any questions if anyone has any.
How many tow truck companies are represented here in the big picture? How many are there in the county and how many are represented here?
Last count, I know there were 250 tow trucks in the county. Does anybody know how many total companies? 60-ish? 62? 75, okay.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Is there, yes, can you state your name for the record?
My name's Clinton Bass. I just got off the phone with GovTow support while we're talking about the system that we're using, where I was just informed by GovTow support on a recorded conversation with GovTow support to lie to the sheriff's department. about the reason that I missed a call a minute ago. I declined a call sitting right here in the room because I could not make it to that call. Couldn't. I'm sitting here. So I disregarded the call. The car didn't load. So it made me angry that I got moved on the list. So I called GovTow support. What I was told was to call county and send emails. It's on recording. Scott Engle heard it. I was told to lie to y'all to get put back on rotation in my spot that I missed because I denied a call. Do you realize how many people on the list, if you can watch it, are put back in their spot due to a previous rotation call? Has anybody seen that in parentheses off to the side? Anybody? They just told me to lie to y'all. GovTow support. And I can send the recording to whoever would like it.
Captain Dunlap.
Captain Dunlap? Yes, sir.
Thank you for not lying. Proceed. If you give us your name for the record, please.
How you doing? My name's TJ Knox. I've lived in Montgomery County my whole life. First of all, I'd like to thank God for allowing us to live in a country that we are allowed to speak in. I've been in the towing business since I was 17 years old. I'm very blessed to own several businesses in Montgomery County. 2020 was a hard year on everybody, including the towing business. With that said, in December of 2020, my company has loaded 62 cars to the impound lot in December before this started. That's about 2 cars a day. From January 1st to January 31st, we've loaded 17 cars off the rotation. That's about 1 car every 2 days, and there's a lot of companies here that's loaded less than that. We lost about 3/4 of our business overnight. That's a big difference. We used to compete with 10 to 12 companies in East County. Now we're competing against 31 companies in East County. The towing policy has got the county divided up in 24 zones. It's kind of confusing. Some of these zone rotation takes several weeks for you to get 1 tow out of. There are many times that you're having to wait even longer than that. Crazy response times for law enforcement to have to wait on the side of the road waiting on a record. It puts them more at risk. Not to mention someone's car gets towed because they ran out of gas or had an accident in New Caney, and a good chance are there's a company in Magnolia that's picking up their car. So the citizen would have to drive approximately 60 miles to either clean out their car because they had an accident or to pick up their car because maybe as little as they run out of gas. This is crazy and it makes no sense. We made a law, or we passed a deal because we had Harris County tow trucks coming in Montgomery County, picking up cars and taking them back to downtown Houston. That's only about, downtown Houston's only about 25 miles, but we created a mess that truckers from Magnolia can come to New Caney and take them back to Magnolia. Now the citizen has to drive 60 miles. I'm just asking to consider the going to these changes because it'll help everybody. Not only law enforcement, not only citizens, but it'll help the towing industry. If you have any questions, I'm glad to ask.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? And if you would hold your applause, please. And we do appreciate your enthusiasm. Thank you. Yes. State your name for the record, please.
Charlie Miller with Miller Towing and Recovery. Thank you guys for talking about this today. Really do appreciate everything that's going on to help the situation. You know, for myself, we didn't really want the rotation, but if we have it, our desire is to see it work properly, to see it be a well-oiled machine that works well for the tow companies and for the county, because it has to go both ways. It has to work for everybody to be efficient one of the big things whenever it was passed that you guys talked about a lot was fair and equitable for everybody. The things that we have going on now are not fair and equitable. We need to see a change that's being presented today to be passed. Our company is a small company. We lost 75% of non-consent tows from December to January. 75% decrease. That's a lot. We don't just live off the streets, thank goodness, but that's a huge drop in 1 month to that. We really appreciate when we have the opportunity to speak with the sheriff's department and to work with you guys. Some of us out here are really trying to work together with the sheriff's department to try to see changes put in place that will make this thing work. I just pray that you would see that these changes would be beneficial to us as an industry and to the county and to the officers that are out there. And the only other thing I would ask is that we need to be more strict with the rules that are in place. Be it common ownership or whatever the rules are, the rules need to be really enforced to make this system work. Because if the rules aren't enforced, then the rotation, we've had it different ways for so long, everybody wants to cling to the old way. If the rules aren't enforced and followed, then the rotation will not work.
What rules are not being enforced now?
We have a huge issue with common ownership that's not being enforced. We see a lot of first records being used, and I understand there's been problems with the dispatch software and getting records on scene, and hopefully the change in the zones would shorten that ETA time and try to help with that. But we've seen trucks that were a company that their TDLR was expired for the first 2 weeks of January. That was one of the companies that loaded more than anybody else did in January. And they were expired for the first 2 months, the first 2 weeks of the month. Nobody questioned it. Nobody called them out. Nobody said, hey, you can't come out here and load. Your stuff is expired. You're not allowed to drive that truck down the road and do anything with it as a tow truck, much less come out on the county and load a non-consent tow. These things have not been pursued. They have not been pushed forward. And they really should be.
I would like to say something.
Yes. State your name for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Shea Damick on behalf of Johnny Damick's Record Service. So we've started the rotation, and since January 1, we are a good example of your company that just signed up for your primary area. We have loaded 4 cars, and we are used to loading that per day. So yes, I'm in support of what's about to be presented with the 4-zone map. However, I want to cover our bases in case it doesn't get approved. If it doesn't get approved, I beg you to please let us change our equipment, add equipment if necessary throughout the year, and add zones or remove zones if we need to. So we can adjust according to whatever y'all do agree on. Thank you.
Judge, is there anyone here that has a different opinion? I mean, we're hearing, I get it, everybody's in favor. Does anybody have anything different to say about this program?
Right. I stood here before y'all last year and thought to myself, hey, this rotation process is a great idea. Versus me listening to a scanner and figuring out where I need to go. It'd be nice for the county to actually kind of maybe depend on us a little bit and give us a call and tell us where to go, where they need us, and what they want us to perform. In the last 30 days, I have found that maybe that ain't the answers. Because as long as there's a room for a chip system and every municipality in this county is not on the same page, I don't see how this system's gonna work. Just last week, we were up in a zone, and so my driver sat there. He chipped 6 times before he ever got his rotation. 14 hours, he chipped 6 times. And that's why you see on this rotation list that it says back up due to previous call. Because if I accept the call and I just don't go, in 20 minutes the officer gets upset because his record's not there, and he goes, have those records behind me just match? Well, so I just got excluded, so that's why they put you back up. I never left my couch. You understand? I'm not saying I personally have done that, but there's companies out there that are doing it. They accept the call and they don't move. They're gonna get put right back up in 20 minutes. Because why? Because the officers on scene are not gonna go. Hey, give me the next rotation record. He didn't show up. They go, have records on scene ship. Which in the system makes it look like the record that did accept the call just got skipped. So they put him right back up and he's never left his couch. But he left the officer sitting on the side of the road for 30 minutes. And now the officer's mad. And who's he mad at? He's mad at us as a whole, not as one individual person or one individual company. They get mad at, so as long as these other municipalities with DPS and constables and city municipalities are going, I'm not waiting 20 minutes, half these records are behind me, chip. We're not, this system's not gonna work. It's just not. It can't. I can't reiterate. I was on another scene the other day and with a DPS officer and I schooled him. Let me show you how the system will work if you would utilize it. We're here. There was 7 records there. I said, sir, I am your next record up for rotation. This truck was in the middle of the road. Versus you going, hey, y'all just chip, call for your next record. 9 out of 10 times they're sitting there anyways waiting on you to call. And so in front of him, I accepted the call and then showed him the text where it gave the address right where I needed to be. And he goes, then what's the problem? You are not utilizing the system. You're not calling for first record, you're just having these records chipped. But the ordinance says I can't be on scene. But if I'm not on scene, I get skipped. So we're in a crossroads. Do we go or do we not? Because if we're not there, then we don't make no money. If we are there, then we take a chance of getting penalized by the sheriff's department because we're not supposed to be there. I do believe that these four districts that we've had for years that have worked, that these storage facilities in that district, tow in that district, it worked. We had 10 or 15 companies to where now we got 30.
If I may, and I have a question, because as you were just saying, that they did not call, they are not calling according to the rotation.
Absolutely not.
So whether or not you have 74 or 24, what difference does it make if the process back at dispatch is not taking place?
The dispatching is not the problem. If the officers don't ask for it, then it don't get dispatched. If the officer goes, hey, give me, there's 7 records behind me, just y'all match, figure it out who's towing his car, get it out in the middle of the roadway, because it's a traffic hazard. What determines the traffic hazard? Just because a car's in a moving lane of traffic, it doesn't make it a traffic hazard and an officer safety issue. I mean, we have officers in everywhere around the country that will get out and direct that traffic around until their record gets there, whether it's 20 minutes or 45 minutes in some counties. They get out and they direct that traffic. It's not a life-threatening ordeal. Even on the freeway, you're on a 4-lane highway, you got 1 lane blocked. Hey, it's going to be all right. There's 3 more lanes. That's what the red and blue lights are for. And it comes. All the safety vests and everything that we do have to have on these jobs, and the officers too. And we're the ones up here griping about it and going, hey, we'd like to change and meeting with you guys and trying to get something done.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment? Ron, we've got 3 minutes per comment.
Yeah, real quick. I'm with A++. Dead. Fair. The software system caught us all off guard. We didn't know nothing about it till the very end. It doesn't work, I think they'll agree. We get called up, we get put back up. You don't get penalized. Hell, we already figured out tricks how to get put back up. All you gotta do is just say, I got a 35, 40-minute ETA, and they put you back up. The system don't work. Besides that, Monday through Friday, they're off. My company suffers during the weekend because nobody's there. We asked, and I agree with Amy, everything that they've asked, and it's great, okay? But there's nobody for us to say, hey, I got skipped. South County ain't supposed to be up. They already loaded. I'm up next. On Saturday and Sunday, nobody around. The software is not working. It caught us off guard. I've done rotation with Tomball, and they have a live dispatcher. Why are we not just having a live dispatcher? That's what I signed up for, and they did too. You hand us this, and they ain't even been proven who they are, what they're doing, and we're paying $25 every time they call us. Not only that, my wife and me run the company. She's got to spend all this time saying, hey, that was a cancel. cancel, you accept it, but we didn't load it. We gotta figure out how much money is ours that ain't theirs. And it's almost like, why are we having to do that? We're working for them now. It's terrible.
The $25 fee, though, if you're being intellectually honest, is it hasn't taken place yet, correct, according to the sheriff's office? It may, but right this second it hasn't.
You know, a lot of stuff ain't taking place.
Well, all I'm saying is just wondered to throw that in, because we had that discussion. So, but we do appreciate your comments very much.
Why can't we just have a dispatcher, a live dispatcher? We don't know if we're sending a flatbed out or a wheel lift out for a motorcycle crash, or if it needs a flatbed because all 4 tires are knocked off. We don't know anything from the app. Nothing. I mean, there's not enough detail. They tell us 59, 29. That's it. They don't tell if it's southbound or northbound. We don't know. We get there and we're on the minutes. But I mean, this live dispatch, if you're not gonna do that, I mean, do something. We need some help. Sheriff, this has been a disaster.
Good to see you, Dale.
Thank you. More comments? All right. If there are none, then if we can, thank you for the citizen comments. Precinct 4, Commissioner Metz, consider, discuss, take action to amend, modify, or update the Montgomery County Texas ordinance regulating incident management, towing, rotation, and storage services.
After having many discussions with different people, everybody's probably, you record drivers and the sheriff and myself and the court are a little bit wary of dealing with this. But I believe, from talking to many of you, DPS and others, that this will help a lot, these 4 districts here. And I don't, that's the way I feel. One of my main concerns early on was having your vehicle towed across town. And I voted for, but I was told that we were gonna have individual lots in different areas, or I wouldn't have voted for that at the time. I didn't go back and read it, maybe I should have, but I trusted who told me that that's the way it was going to be. But I believe that these 4 districts will improve this considerably. Address common ownership problem, all those things. Make it more secure for law enforcement. I think you'll be able to get to your accident scenes in less than 20 minutes in most cases. There's going to be an exception to the rule, but in most cases, I think that you'll be able to get there in a short time frame. I think it's better for public safety. That's what this was about to start with. We're not in the business of regulating commerce in this body. That's not our job. It's about public safety. And then fairness. So my motion is today is part that you've read. Move to direct the county's office to prepare a revision to the Montgomery County ordinance regulating incident management, towing, rotation, and storage services. And the revision should include, this is a motion, consolidating towing zones into 4 districts, 4 basic districts, requiring that in order to tow in these districts, the tow company must have a licensed storage facility in that particular tow district, have at least 1 wrecker assigned to that district. Vehicles that are towed without owner's consent must be stored in the same district, and allow companies 30 days to secure a storage lot in the district if they had one in the previous 12 months. And it's my understanding it's already in the policy as far as there will be no new companies or storage lots added until at least till January 22. Okay. So disregard 5. That's my motion. I move.
All right, do we have a second?
I second.
Here we have a second. Discussion.
Sheriff, would you like to address any of the comments that have been made, including claims of common ownership?
I'd like to hear about software.
Expand acquired TDLR issues, and why we don't have a live dispatcher.
I'm glad you were writing those down. Dale Bell was the last one to speak, and so he makes a lot of good points, but that one's fresh on my mind. And the reason we're not using a live dispatcher is because we're moving to encryption, radio encryption. So they're not gonna be able to hear the radio frequencies, which was part of the motivation for going to towing anyway. It's been a step-by-step process. That was a process that was begun with a regional radio system, and it was always intended, when we got on that system, that we would move to encryption eventually. So that's my answer to that. What's the next one?
Common ownership.
We reviewed common ownership, specific complaints received from tow companies with our legal counsel, and we have been unable to identify a specific instance of a violation of TDLR rules or the county ordinance that violates. We have the documentation. It's been presented to council, and by the letter of the law inside the ordinance, it does not appear that there has been identified common ownership.
Right, and while we understand that the ordinance is drafted to model TDLR, so in their registration, that's where they're looking. However, we are working with the Sheriff's Office to have different rules and processes in place to fully evaluate if they are registered in other locations, and we come to find out that they have multiple services and companies. We will be addressing those in the future.
So you're still in
But
process of doing it?
currently, the way it's drafted, they are in compliance.
But if we find out that they are purposely trying to circumvent this law by
Right.
lying, we can hold them accountable for that. And we will do everything we can if we find out. that
It
they
is,
have.
it is definitely a problem that we are aware of and working on a solution for.
And Amy, you said you were currently working on that, that we are now?
We are working on a
Okay.
solution for it. It was the Sheriff's Office actually brought it to our attention, and so we are looking into that issue.
We're responding to all complaints. We're not taking any enforcement actions. Schoonover spoke to that quite a bit. His frustration with us not, Charles Miller did as well, frustration with not enforcing. Well, there's a reason for that. It's the flip side of the same coin with the complaints about how there's problems. There's problems with the software, there's problems with dispatch. There's been a huge problem with addresses. And that is not the fault of the record services. So yes, we're asking for a lot of voluntary compliance, that this is what the ordinance says, and we ask that you follow the rules. We're a law enforcement agency. We're used to following the rules as well. And so we have not punished anyone. We have not taken anyone out of rotation, and we have not even charged fees. The ordinance, because of requests that were made during the summer, is why the tow dispatching company was even brought into this. Because if you recall, one of the things that most of you wanted in order to pass this ordinance was that they be able to check out to watch a baseball game, to go on vacation, etc. Well, we can't do that internally with the Sheriff's Office. We added a layer of regulation, but not a layer of any new employees. My budget did not increase. I have no new employees. I am using existing clerks, an alarm permitting guy. One of my captains is pulled off and spending an inordinate amount of time on this. So we recognize that there's problems, and we're trying to get it solidified. And we've made great leaps and bounds from week one. I mean, there's no doubt about that things have gotten better. But we're not, we haven't sent out billing, was my point. The $7 would be collected for the vendor for the tows. That is something we're gonna have to collect. The $25 that goes on top of that into the general fund, that was included in the ordinance. I will leave it up to you gentlemen at this point or some other point.
So far, you've not charged that though, correct?
We have not charged it. We're still reconciling the first bill, because the problem that the record companies have seen in accepted tows, refused tows, we're seeing on our dispatch side as well, and we've got the vendor URI, so we're trying to reconcile the two, and we have not completed that task yet. I've got quite a few people pulled off of their normal jobs, trying to make sure that that's right before any bills go out. And that's something we absolutely want to try to get right, which we will do our best when it comes to that.
Sheriff, you mentioned there were some issues that came up, software issues that you were working on. Can you share with us about that?
Yeah, well, whenever this was passed in the summer, we were hoping that we would have our P1 CAD stood up, which CAD is our computer-aided dispatch. We use Film and Flex right now. Typical for a software implementation project, it's been pushed back. So it will probably take place well on later in this year. So we were wanting to have an interface between the URI vendor and CAD. So when dispatch did something, it spoke directly with the vendor. Make sense? There was an interface and the information's flowing back and forth. Well, we chose not to spend the money to do an interface with a CAD that we're ending production with. We're moving to a new CAD. We will do the interface with Motorola P1 whenever that is stood up. That hasn't been done, and we didn't forecast that back during the summer. So in reality, you remember there's boots on the ground. There's people that are doing work every time that there's a tow, and that includes our dispatchers. So they're in the CAD system, and they put an address in one way there, and that's the way they're used to doing it. And then they turn to another software, which is URI. Turns out that the addressing that they use here doesn't work over here. They had to completely reformat it in a different way, and it took us probably a couple of weeks to realize that was what the problem was. And so you might have been dispatched to somewhere on 105 and sent east when you were actually supposed to be west because of the block range problems. So that is one of many problems that we didn't anticipate. You can't. We've corrected a lot of them, and we have many more. We have complaints that have come from the record companies, and we're taking every one of those seriously and investigating those all the way through, as we always have. And I understand some of the straight up guys that want enforcement. I get that. I want enforcement too. But you've got to have a good, solid set of well-known, well-published, well-understood rules before you can do that.
Sheriff, you said yourself that your goal was to get in here, let's implement what we have, and that you were going to be willing to make changes when appropriate.
Sure.
Can you just expand a little bit on where we are now? And I don't want you to say in 2 weeks or 6 weeks, 6 months, but I want you to just kind of explain your philosophy on where we are and why maybe today may not be the best time to take action.
Well, we're still getting our house in order, and I hate that the record companies are suffering for it. I really do. I have a lot of friends, whatever, in the room here, and we certainly don't want to see their businesses suffer. That's never the intent of this. This was always directed towards public safety. You all understand that. But some of the changes that we're bringing in are still cutting edge. We just launched the Android app, and that is available. The record companies who have Android phones are able to use those. We just began testing the Apple app, the iOS app, yesterday. So there's a handful of record companies that agreed to do the demo, and so they're seeing how this works before it becomes available in the Play Store so they can download it. I mean, having those two up and operational, functional, is huge strides forward. I've already mentioned we're moving to Motorola at some point in time. We've added some map layers for what the deputies see that were different from what they could see before. We're doing the billing reconciliation, addressing common ownership. Once we start enforcing the rules, I believe that organically, those record services that can't respond to the zones that they signed up for, they're going to get pulled out. They're going to get suspended out of those zones. For example, if you're a small record company that has 3 records and you've signed up for 15 zones, responding to that with 3 trucks, saying you have all 3 trucks working at the same time, is pretty unlikely you're going to be able to get there within 20 minutes. So everyone suffers from that. So I think organically that some of the multiple, somebody said 30-something in the zone. Yeah, that's true. We've got 30-something in some of the zones. We've got 15 in others. So I believe that in the course of this first year, we're 40 days in, and once we start enforcing that penalty, you took out most of the penalties. There's very few enforcement tools left because the record companies wanted those removed, and y'all conceded that point before you passed the ordinance this summer. So one of the penalties that remains is if you no-show 1, 2, 3 times, it's progressive discipline. You're going to get noticed, you're going to get warned, you're going to get removed from rotation for a period of time. So I would suggest that you give us a little bit of time so we can get our house in order before we start enforcing the rules. And it comes back to the record companies. If they're in zones that they can't respond to, I would suggest that they self-correct and just service the zones that they can.
So if you were to load the current map that is being presented by NITS, you and I had a conversation, and there are some issues, addresses, they're loading into CAD properly.
Yeah, it's a whole lot more than just taking a map and scanning it into the system. There's address points and center lines and locations and a lot of GIS, ArcView information that I wouldn't begin to try to explain to you.
That it's not as simple as just.
It's not a simple change. This is a huge change to the ordinance that would take us back to ground zero with this map. Because once we get the map in, traditionally whenever we've loaded maps in for different reasons, it's broken other maps. So right now, trying to upload this map broke our law zones. So we lost a lot of addresses that's data we're not going to be able to get back. So we're still recovering from that. And thank goodness we've got a really competent GIS person in IT that has dropped everything that she's doing. I appreciate Bobby and his crew for letting us have her. She's dropped everything to try to get this fixed.
Sheriff, as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in Montgomery County, are we performing this duty more safely under this ordinance starting January 1st than we were in December?
Oh, absolutely. Not racing to the scene. The 15-minute record calls are inherently dangerous. I've been a street cop. This is my 27th year with the Sheriff's Office. And I've also been a citizen just innocently driving down the road, and I see some hazardous driving, and I know exactly where that record driver's going, and I know why they're doing what they're doing. That was the framework that we set up for them. And so correcting that, where they know that they have 20 minutes or not to respond to a location, which we've screwed up. They don't always know where that location is. It's valid points at northbound, southbound 59. That makes a difference. So when we're still training our people. So that yes, it is definitely safer. We've accomplished the public safety part, but we have a lot of internal failures that we're still trying to correct. A lot of these were anticipated. You're dealing with software, you're going to have problems. Another point I'd like to make is Schoonover also spoke to cities not using the tow. If I'm right here, why aren't you using the tow rotation? Cities aren't bound to the tow rotation. DPS is not bound to the tow rotation. We have asked for them to join because that would be more rotations that would happen. We've also said we're not going to do 15-minute record calls. In the interest of public safety, if the Sheriff's Office dispatches for you, we won't do those. And so we've begun to, by sending out notice to the police chiefs across the county, that they're going to either figure out a rotation of their own, figure out a dispatch channel of their own, or come on to the county tow ordinance, because that is no longer going to be an option. So there are entities that are still chipping, but that should not be any county law enforcement, which are sheriffs and constables. Also, very valid points about first record on the scene. So my 20-minute guy didn't show up, so there's some records that are sitting over here. I'm just going to pick one of them and not ask for the next guy on the tow rotation. Absolutely an internal training issue with the Sheriff's Office.
So that's going to.
We have already modified our policy. We now have to have a supervisor's approval before you can skip a record. You have to do that on a traffic hazard as well. So we're involving a supervisor, and then the supervisor has to document. That wasn't something that was done up until just very recently. So that took 3 or 4 weeks to get that policy written. Policy writing is not as easy as it sounds. Lawyers know that very well. So we got that modified, and we're doing our best to ensure that our personnel are educated. It's new for them too. I mean, some of these guys have been shipping records for a long time, and that's the only system we know. So to get them to adhere to the new policy, get the supervisors to understand the policy, and getting everybody to read them. There's still people out there that don't know what the ordinance says.
Are there plans in the future for a live dispatch?
No.
Not at all.
We're going to be encrypted, so nobody will be able to hear a dispatcher.
Is everybody encrypted, the EMS, the fire department?
Different system.
I'm sorry?
Different system.
Can they hear?
Conroe PD is encrypted, I believe. Is that right, Engle?
Yeah.
We have not yet. We are capable of encrypting now. We just haven't chosen to do it yet. So and the reason for that is we dispatch for every agency or every law enforcement agency other than Conroe and Conroe ISD. So because of that, we want to ensure that they have encryption compatible radios before we encrypt. We've given them deadlines. They're struggling with their budgets in some circumstances. COVID has put them behind with their sales tax revenue. So there are a lot of reasons why, so we're trying to be as
All right, well, what else? What else? Any other?
And when it comes to this, if this is the will of the court, this is the will of the sheriff, but just know it won't happen anytime soon. the implementation of it because the policy hasn't been written. We are incapable of doing it because we're still working on the basics. This may be a good idea, but we would have to start all over with permitting. We would have to start all over with vehicle storage facility inspections, and we would have to start all over with a map. That is a daunting task because this is a duplication of something that we haven't even gotten figured out to do the first time, much less the second time.
I guess I have a question here, in just the scheme of things, and not directing it, attacking anybody or anything. You brought it up, Commissioner, that we've been looking at this deal for 8 years. I was involved in the House of Representatives when it hit the 84th session and the 85th session, with Representative Metcalf. And we met, we had workshops, everybody got together, we talked about this stuff. You've met people, I've met people, we committed, put a committee together to meet with people. And it sounds to me like what we should have done was waited, was look at all these things. Okay, here's what we want to do, and rather than just launch it, make sure that our software was right, ensure that our information concerning our zones was going to work. I know we discussed all this. I was in a bunch of those discussions and I listened to these things, but in retrospect, we had, common ownership issues, that all of this, much of this could have been resolved. Had we run the traps on,
Not really. I mean, a lot of it we didn't know until it launched, and if we delayed it 6 months, then some of these problems absolutely would have continued to happen. We just didn't know until we tried it. It was a rip the Band-Aid off approach that whenever this was passed, the effective date was January 1st, and it's been painful.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
No question. So, but here's the deal. If this were a better program, you're saying, well, now we got to start all over. We're taking what we already have. We're going to stumble through that until we get this into place, and this will be prolonged for another 6 months. And it seems to me, work with me here, that we've got something here that, with this and with what you're doing, that still kind of needs to be put together. And I mean, it's just by what we've heard, it's like you said, it just takes time, and you got to work through it. And to move this, as you said, it will take another 6 months before this is all implemented. And I got to tell you, I'm inclined to suspend the ordinance and entertain a motion to go back to the chip system until we get it right. I know that I did say I was making that motion, but we've just said here, in the sheriff, it's not your fault, it's not their fault. It's a perfect storm that has kind of come together, and us trying to do what we want to do best for the safety of the public.
You gave a little bit
You know
of
what I'm
history.
saying?
Yeah, you gave a little bit of history there, Judge, and I respect that history. I was a captain under Sheriff Gage whenever this started. At least 4 or 5 years that we went through this process to get where we are with the passing of legislation. I never asked that this happened. I was surprised in court whenever the court handed it to me as a brand new sheriff. And so through the will of the court, we have done our best, and I feel that the ordinance that we proposed to you back during the spring of last year was better than what we passed in the summer. Some of the concessions that were made, I still disagree with, and I think we're suffering from that to this day. But if you go back to chipping, I think that defeats the whole issue of why we have done this to begin with, and it's for public safety.
And it's not in congruence with what the public wanted. They asked for this, they want safer roads, they want to make, I don't want to see 15 wreckers lined up on the freeway. You might want to, I don't like it. And with that, I want to call the question and proceed with Commissioner.
Okay, you can call it, but I do want to comment to that. I don't want to see 15 records on the side either. I was one in the House of Representatives who worked with Will on this deal.
I just want to make sure we don't go back.
Just so you know.
Got it.
But what I don't want to do though is to have something that Commissioner Metz and Riley have worked on that is a good thing, and that we decide to do, and then stumble through with what we're already doing, plus another 6 months to get this implemented, as you're sitting here telling us that we can't do, this isn't gonna happen overnight. We can all vote for it right now, but we're gonna continue with the same stuff. We're gonna continue with the problems with our apps, with our Android and our iOS and these other issues. And
Since we got the water, since we got the water completely muddied up,
Well, I called the question. I'd like to.
Yeah, we haven't
I'd
called
like
the
to-
question. Go ahead.
I would like for us to vote on Commissioner.
Can we have a clarification, or Commissioner Matz, are we keeping the zones and adding districts basically on top of that? Or are we just going with the districts? With your motion?
The districts, he may need the zones as the way it is, in road radio control district, he can answer that better than me. But it's just as simple as I could make it, 4 districts, if you want to tow in that district, you have a lot in that district, and on at least 1 record, and it's to be approved for whatever the regulations are, for them to be on there, where it's TDLR, or policy for Montgomery County for that lot to be approved.
Okay,
Well, the question is, right now, there are 24 zones, and my understanding is you have to be any zone, whatever zones you're in, you can be in all 24. And 1 storage lot per county. So the question in the county, the question is, in using the map, going to a 4 districts, as you described it, is that doing away with the 24 towing zones and consolidating to 4 zones, or are we keeping is your motion to keep the 24 towing zones as is and just add the requirement that
they have a lot within those districts.
automobile towed within any of those zones, and the district must go to a storage lot in that district? You see the difference? We need to know what your motion is so that if it passes, we can draft.
Mine is for the district. I see you standing up, TJ, you have something on?
If you make it out, whatever's easier for the sheriff. As long as we store on the east side, west side, north side, and south side, if it's easier for the sheriff to keep the zones, keep the zones. If it's not, it's easier for them to.
I just need to know so I can memorialize what the change or any change to the ordinance would be. And
Do you know how you can accomplish that, Sheriff? I don't without these districts. If you do, I'm certainly.
Okay,
Well,
here's what we have. We have called the question. We have.
I can answer.
Commissioner Noack has called the question.
I understand you called it, I need a clarification as to whether we're keeping these,
My
or
understanding
what the
was
motion
that
is.
we have 4 districts now instead of 27 zones.
Okay.
24, is that correct?
Well, it was what is on this paper right here.
So I think the question is, do you want, is this a map of storage zones or is this a map of tow rotation zones? And I think your answer is this is this is a map of storage zones, not rotation zones. So we would
And that's
continue
the way
with
I read it.
24 rotations, but only have these storage lots. I'm hearing a lot of buzz. I don't know the answers.
It says consolidated tow zone.
Yes, what it says. It says consolidated tow
So
zone.
this motion,
Yeah.
then.
That's okay.
And again, the reason we need clarification is because the map has storage zones underneath. So that's why we want to avoid any, we need to know what the motion is.
I want to make it 4 districts. That's what everybody approved. The 4 districts.
So we would just have four rotations?
Correct. If you have a lot in there, you'll have a rotation.
And the argument from the small record companies all along has been, I'm in the towing business, not in the storage business, those are your words. And so we made him get one zone, one storage lot, so now you're gonna make him get 4.
Sheriff,
More
any
than
thought you
likely,
respect, I
more.
feel like we're still continuing to debate the topic. I called the question, I want us to have a vote.
Well, we're in discussion on motion and second here
Well,
still.
we call the question.
They didn't stop the
That calls the question. But they were, well, for their benefit, they were clarifying the terminology.
Thank you.
Correct, thank you. All right, the question has been called. We have a motion on the floor, and it is to move to
Direct the
Commissioner
county
Metz's
attorney.
Appendix B.
Right, direct the
Along with
county
his
attorney to amend the ordinance consistent with the comments Commissioner Metz made. That's the motion.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor of Commissioner Metz's program, say aye. Aye.
Opposed.
4-1. All right, so the motion passed. Any other miscellaneous issues we need to take up? If not, the court will adjourn, and we have the.
We will be bringing back, we will be bringing back an amended ordinance.
Okay, so, I just stop everything that I'm doing and wait on the update?
So, right now, the ordinance has not been repealed or amended. We have to bring back a amended to ordinance. So it'll continue as it is until the next court, at which time we'll be able to implement those
Okay.
changes.
So continue as is with my implementation until a new implementation process begins with the modifications.
Right. And
I respect the will of the court.
And Sheriff, thank you for that. Also, where you can combine what you're doing right now, so it will flow into the other. We have some anticipation thinking in that direction as well, which I'm sure you want.
And we want to take this meeting.
We are trying to. But this meeting, is there a second to adjourn?
All in favor?
I know. I can say something in miscellaneous.
Yes, you can.
All right, this is what I was gonna say this before Commissioner Nowak called the vote. It's muddied up, I understand, it's screwed up mess right now. Can we suspend the ordinance now, 90 days, to put this all together and bring this back with the new tow zones and start and implement that plan?
And do the chip system.
I don't care
You
what-
have to do something.
I don't care.
I would second that motion right there.
Give us a moment to see if that would be something that would be under the notice under the agenda as notice.
All appropriate action to amend, modify.
We would need it,
That makes sense to do.
Because they suspended the first meeting.
What that would look like would be, we have this current ordinance in place. We just voted to make some changes to the other one. There's going to be transition. What's the easiest thing to do during the transition? Commissioner Riley, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying let's suspend the ordinance while we finalize what we need to do on
90
that
days.
and put the chip system back in place meanwhile so people don't go broke.
Well, part of the question is, I guess only the sheriff can answer that, is what would be the easiest thing to do while we are drafting the amendment of the ordinance?
Well,
I don't know that, I'm not on the ground.
Again, we got the sheriff trying to implement, the system now, and they were telling him to change it. He's trying to do both of them at the same time. We gotta suspend one of them to make the other, get the other one in place, in my opinion. That's just how that's
Well,
going.
you wanna go back to chipping and try to get your staff now retrained to go back to
No,
chip
no.
within 90 days? No, that's not your recommendation.
Right.
I mean,
It would be that they'd have to go back to some chip system, or I will pull them through. Well, we do.
That's what they want.
No, it's not that that's what we want, but financially, while this is all trying to be figured out financially, the only people suffering are us. So while the system isn't working, and they're working on that, and while they're working on zones and maps and whatever else, financially, it doesn't affect anybody but us. That's it. So that's all that we want is just.
And I'm trying to help you do that.
Absolutely, you are. We very much
I'm
appreciate that.
trying to figure out a way to make that happen.
Okay.
I don't know what they're gonna let us do.
About 30 seconds. Let him work. Full 20 officers, 19, so go back to the way it was.
Okay. Hey, Sheriff, can we not launch this fair, okay? Go back to the chipping. I agree, we want rotation, we just want it to be fair. But every problem you've had has been at our expense. As a company, we're suffering big time. Hey, we're not against you.
Whoa, guys,
Hang on, we're past the comments.
yeah, it's not, this is not a workshop, this is court. Okay, so we have to operate according to statute. So just standing up and making comments, God bless you, it's not gonna work. And we passed the comments, the attorneys have gone to talk about how we can possibly implement what we're trying to do here for the benefit of all. So if you work with us, and again, we appreciate your enthusiasm.
Given the way the agenda item was noticed, it says take appropriate action to minimize our update. I don't believe suspension
Just properly
That's
notice.
properly noticed to suspend the ordinance
Altogether.
completely altogether. What we would recommend is that, you know, it can't really be suspended at this time. It continues coming forward. We plan on the amendments having be ready for 2 weeks from now. Then if there's going to be a problem with implementation or a time period, you can include in your motion, you know, adopting those amendments to suspend the others, or we'll make sure that that
We'll make
ability
sure
to
that we have an
suspend
agenda item.
the policies is included and noticed properly next time.
Okay.
That may be clear as mud,
Right,
but in essence,
right,
I don't think it's noticed sufficiently to be able to suspend the ordinance in its entirety, so we have to deal with that in 2 weeks.
I just see there's gonna be a problem trying to do both of those at the same time.
What about?
We can do that in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what- Yes, if it appears and y'all decide it needs to be suspended for an implementation period, then that can be included in the notice on the next session and/or in any resolution on
If we wanted to make that emergency item for an emergency meeting, we can do that, correct?
Right,
Yes,
you could have a meeting with 72 hours
that.
notice.
Okay. Friday? Thank you.
Yep.
12:24?
No. Don't do it.
No, let's talk